Again, in the area of psychological physics, if there was such an area, there is. And the revolutionary three-dimensional scheme of energy flows, angers can only come from below. And by angers, you can look at it as being a kind of molecular pattern of energy. But just accept angers as being all kinds of what? Angers. But what has never been noticed is, in the most correct sense of the term, is angers can only flow from a lesser area, from a lower area. It is impossible for anyone to hate their superiors. Remember, we're talking about a 3D world now, and there is validity there. I wouldn't even bother to talk about it. It's impossible for you to be angry at your superiors. It is only possible for the flows of energy that would fall under the general category that we would refer to as angers and hostilities. It's only possible for it to flow from an inferior position, or put people-wise, to flow from inferiors. You can only be disliked, you can only be hated, you can only be ridiculed, you can only be criticized by your inferiors. Everybody in the 3D world. It is impossible for a superior to hate you. If you want to look at the matter, the area of ad hoc forces, it would be impossible for you to receive an ad hoc D force from a superior position. Then I might ask you, is it possible for a D to come from any superior position, not just vis-a-vis you or an individual? Is it possible? This should bring up the possibility of you considering several other areas. What would this say about man's general concept of there being gods? All gods and all religions, to varying degrees, it may be in supposed retribution for some wrong, but you must admit, damn it, you got to admit, that in some way all gods, Old Testament, New Testament, Allah and Islam, all gods in some way oppress man. Now, if anger, if hostilities, or if all angers can only come from your inferiors, what does that say about man's concept of gods? What kinds of gods have man invented? If you can only be oppressed, take what I assume with this kind of crowd, the better known of the world's religions, somewhere between the Judaic Christian, the Old or New Testament, Jehovah and God was always giving man trouble. All I know the story is that man gave him trouble first, and that he was worshiping some kind of golden idol, or he overran the limits on his master charge. He did something. But the God still in turn turns around and oppresses and says, hey, you've gone too far, and he sends down floods, he sends down volcanoes, he strikes down everybody's youngest child. Now, if that's not oppression, but if oppression, if any sort of anger, if any sort of hostility, criticism, any kind of righteous indignation can only come from one's inferiors, what kind of gods have man created? I might also point out, to get away from religion for a second and into a more physical world, atoms would hate molecules if they could see them, which brings up the question, can an inferior actually see a superior? My 3D suggestion to you, what I was trying to insinuate without going into it, is if you were following into this, that it would be, in a sense, in a real sense, it would be impossible for an atom to see a molecule. They could not see it and recognize it as its superior. So if that be true, if you're following that, then what would that say about all forms of anger, all forms of criticism? If they all come from below, I'll have to draw out a new kind of weird equation. It would mean, in the world of 4D reason, which is the only kind there is, it would mean that all criticism, all anger, comes from those who can't see the source of their anger, the object of their anger, I mean. That you can only hate that which you can't see. If it must come from an inferior position, if it must come from your inferiors, and atoms cannot see molecules, they cannot identify them. They cannot see that they are my complex superior. Within the world of molecules reside I, reside all of my possibilities. You could not deny, even in the 3D world, you could not deny that a molecule is the superior of an atom. A molecule on that level contains all possibilities of an atom, or a atom. So if there was any hostility, if there was any angers, it would have to come from the lower position upwards. In other words, a molecule could not hate an atom. It could not be critical. It's impossible. So if there was any form of criticism, any form of anger, sarcasm coming, it would come from the atomic level to the molecular level. But if it couldn't be seen, what does that tell you about all forms of angers? The kind of energy that would seem to be in the world of human emotion, and that which would seem to be on the, or in the area of ad hoc D, it would seem to be negative, would seem to be destructive, speaking in an ad hoc manner as opposed to constructive. It always flows from an inferior position to a superior one. Slash, it always flows from an inferior person, thing, event, toward a superior one. It cannot go in the other direction in the 3D world. There is no such thing. Some of you should already glimpse that. I know it's unreasonable, insane, and etc., and there's no proof of it, but some of you by now, as soon as you hear it, you should recognize it's true. If you don't, it's not correct. Angers cannot flow from a superior position downward. Now, what is the feeling that many people have? Or what's the feeling that everybody has under certain energetic conditions? And that is that they were being oppressed, that they were being oppressed by their parents at some time or the other, by their teachers, by their relatives, by other forms of their blood kin, by their peers, now by their employer, by their mate, by society, and lastly, of course, by that wonderful booger-boo event. So what kind of person are you if you can only be, which is, if you're a person, this is true, you can only be angered. You can only be the object of anger from your inferiors, and you find it to be of consequence. Now, if you're ordinary, of course, you're supposed to. But if you can be madded at, if you can recognize, accept, and react to the energy of any form of hostility apparently aimed at you, what does that say about you, other than you're ordinary? What does it further say about all of man's concepts about what is good and proper? All religions, outside religions, all philosophies, all systematic or attempted systematic approaches to humanism, just good moral conduct outside the world of organized religion, all of it has as a counterpart an attack on inhumane, uncivilized, immoral conduct, and of course irreligious conduct. So there is always inherent criticism. Not just that the gods are angry at those who believe in the gods and those involved in some particular religion, but if you are immoral, if you are inhumane, if you are uncivilized, it is also, in a parallel manner, inferring a form of criticism, that you should be that way, and if you're not, you deserve to be criticized. You are being oppressed. You're being oppressed theoretically. You accept it. But all such flows can only come from an inferior position. What else might this suggest to you about the way that life grows? Other than, of course, you can never see how it grows in the 3D, with a 3D view. But just within the realm of trying to take 4D logic down to a 3D fragment, what would that say about the way things grow, the way things expand? Because it would seem to be, to all 2 and 3D views, that all growth, all positive change, has somewhere within it, as a motivation, as an aligning factor, has got to have some form of criticism with it. Why else would anybody want to change? How would they know how to change? How would they know how to do better unless they knew and could identify how to do worse? Unless they were subject to it. Why would anybody want to change? Why would anybody want to be a good Jew, Christian, Muslim, Kawanan? Unless they could hear, either externally or apparently within their own corporation, and hear a voice that says, you are not. It is a form of criticism, a form of oppression. But if it is coming from your inferiors, how, in that 3D world, how is there any idea of a straight line change? If all forms of criticism, including the godly ones, are coming from inferiors, then where is that going to lead even the illusion of a 3D straight line change? That apparently men have been and are being led by superior gods, which I guess to an average person would be an oxymoron, led by gods or else by superior moral standards to do better. But if it is a critique, if it has any D-energy in it, it's coming from an inferior position. So if that be true, anybody that's following this, don't bother to say amen. I ain't going to slow down. Anybody that happens to be following this, then the very things that would seem to be motivating, helping guide change, if it's coming from an inferior position, what kind of change are you going to expect? I hate to go into it. Let's don't think about it. It may be the kind of change that might be available now at the Ace Hardware store. You might be able to take in some coupons. They might even double it this week, that you could trade in on that kind of change. And yet everything in man is wired up to believe that all motivation for change, all feelings of guilt, all feelings of shortcoming are in some way amongst the religious. They are divinely inspired. If a person nowadays individually were not wired up to be particularly religious, they would feel as though it is the spark of my real humanitarianism, it is the innate goodness of man, condemning my inhumane, my uncivilized moments of behavior. But if it is all coming from an inferior position, where do you expect this is going to go? Well, it's definitely not going in a straight line. And it is definitely beyond the realm of ordinary consciousness to perceive of, much less remember, that all angers come from an inferior position, and that your superiors cannot hate you. There cannot be any negative ad hoc D energy come from a superior position, whether it be called God, better ideas, wisdom, enlightened thinking. If it is carried in the form of any kind of ad hoc D energy, it is not coming from your superiors. It is not coming from a superior position in the 3D scheme of things. Where, oh where has, not my little dog, can you turn? Then you should also try and have a recollection that every time you feel any anger, every time you feel angers of any description, you are inferior to whatever it is you believe that you're being angry towards. Another person, an idea, a philosophical system, a religion, some act that occurred. If you feel any anger toward it, it is your superior. Absolutely. This is not any sort of religious claptrap, as you know by now. I'm not trying to weasel in some moralistic parable on you. I'm telling you a physical fact. So in the realm of 4D physics, there's no textbook, and I can't prove it, and I'm the only one who understands it right now. But the energy can only flow in that direction. Whatever it is that you feel any anger toward, it is your superior. You are its inferior. That is the only way in the 3D world that angers, that energy that would qualify as being ad hoc D, of any nature, just look at it as being any form of criticism. That whatever it is you see, whatever person it is you see, whatever act it is you hear about, whatever idea, that somewhere down in your little brain of brain, your heart of hearts, and your liver of livers, something goes, that there is any form of criticism. Of course, with most people, the real truth is, if you react at all, somewhere in there, somewhere down your little renal cells, there's going to be a form of criticism going on. So whatever it is, I'm telling you an absolute physical fact, a mathematical fact. You are inferior to it. Absolutely. You might also then, off on your own for a split second, see how all of this always has been reflected somewhere in the so-called spiritual world of man. All these ideas for thousands and thousands of years that you should not criticize your brother. You should walk a mile in some other Indian shoes if you could stand the odor, and you should not pick out beams in your brother's eye and boulders in his ear until etc. That there is something moralistically abhorrent in this, and you should refrain from doing it to please the gods. The physical reality is that you cannot go anywhere if you're going to spend your time in an imaginary mud wrestling with your inferiors, whether you call them gods, higher ideals, or just plain old nitty-gritty guilt. You're not going to get anywhere. What if you wrestle down some idea, some theory, some apparent nightmare that's been plaguing you, and it is, as I am telling you, absolutely, unconditionally, you're inferior? What if you wrestle it down and pin it and hold it down for the count of 3? What an accomplishment. Wahoo! Also, somewhere in the midst of all this, some of you might have some idea about, or get some cockeyed glimpse of, a new way to look at the difficulty of change. And people believing that they can change, people worrying about those who believe not only that they can change, but they believe that they hadn't been able to, and it may be impossible for them individually. If the only way you can apparently change is by whipping your inferiors, by trouncing on them, if that's it, would you not consider the possibility that change, that is, change in a progressive sense, is another misnomer? That I am every day getting better and better by kicking the ass of my inferiors, of inferior ideas, inferior people, inferior concepts, inferior guilt, inferior ideas about myself. Each and every day, or for some of you, they're not quite that swift, once a month, I kick around, misuse, or at least insult, if not pin, for the count of 3, one of my inferiors. I guess you're certainly paving the road to somewhere with something. This sort of thing, as quick and as hard as it may have thus far sounded, should fall within the ready realm of the OD, of the operational directive. That if there is a 4D reality behind the 3D concept of faith, if there is a 4D reality behind your suspicions of things being as they may be, then you should operate on that basis. You should act upon it. And you should do so in this area. And I'm going into it a little more, I believe, in a minute. That is, the flow of energy always going to an inferior, or from an inferior position. But you should be able to use this in an operational directive manner. That is, it sounds absolutely, non-verbally, unconditionally correct. And I got no choice but to act on it. All right, they should be listed under from my previous mention of the world of OD, of operational directive, how about rule number 1 under OD? And the rule would be that once you realize that something is correct, it's no longer of any consequence. It's of no significance whether it's true or not. That's rule 1. And that is a rule. That once you understand that something's correct, such as energy can only flow from an inferior position, the angers, that is, ad hoc D energy can only flow from an inferior position toward a superior one, from an inferior person, assuming there are such things, and in the 3D world they are, inferior people to superior people. All right, let's assume that is something you understand. Once you understand that that's correct, then it's of no significance whatsoever whether it's true or not. Then there should be a new field of inquiry. Whether I decide to stake it out tonight or not remains to be seen, regarding the difference between correct and true. But there is a difference, I wouldn't have said it. True is really childish. It's necessary, but the whole concept of true, or of truth, I can tell you one way to look at it is the idea of truth, or the true, is a 3D pastime that life has allowed man. As far as any revolutionary activity, as far as discovering what's correct, the idea of true is just meaningless. It's of no significance, none. It's a 3D pastime, and I'm being charitable. I'm being nice to true up until now. In fact, the day would come that a real revolutionary, a revolutionist, would not even deal with such words. It's just, to put it into words, it is silly, useless, childish, inane, moot, irrelevant. It is meaningless. It is, in fact, tedious, which is just one side, just one step away from to discuss what is true. Now, I'm sure that every night that we meet and I do these tapings, that somewhere along the line, I say true, I say truth. Whether I'm saying it, I'm quoting it, I'm referring to what other people say, and still I use it. I use it as nothing else, a reference point. And it's not really much of a reference point. It's only of any apparent significance in the 3D world, because there is a distinct difference between that which is correct and that which is true. True is meaningless once you move even into the 4D world of having a continuing consciousness that time is like a wolf, is like a weave running through all the other apparent physical 3 dimensions. Even if you just can reach that level, the idea of true, all you've got to do is look at this tapestry that then would be unending, to where what seems to be the king on top of the mountain over here, you gaze around a little further around the tapestry and the mountain sitting on top of the fucking king. And it's just as true over here, and all you did was move in what seemed to be horizontal time. In that case, the idea to say, listen, kings always sit on mountains and not the other way around, and that's the truth. That's the truth as long as you only look over here. If you look over here on the other end of this tapestry, here you find a mountain sitting on top of a ruler. You can say, well, it's true now. This is, you're already trying to shave points. Is it true or is it true now? There is only, to use words, the only thing that would be of any significance to a revolutionist would be to understand that something that he or she sees is correct. And after that, there is no significance whatsoever. It is beyond the vocabulary. It would be beyond the real consciousness of the revolutionist as to whether there was any truth in it. It is not the same thing. Truth is, when I say 3D, I can also be a little rougher. The idea of something being true is like a childish signpost. It is like a little notation on a map for the mentally feeble. Of course, we're talking about ordinary people, ordinary consciousness. It is for those with maybe a paint or two busted out of their upstairs windows. The little notes on a map saying things like, the big old arrow saying, this is the map. It would be like you looking on the bottom of your foot and there was a sign saying, you are here. All right. Just say this. I sort of like that. I guess it's good to check periodically, yes? But the idea of something being true, speaking 3D-wise with words, is literally as meaningless, is literally as useless as any of those examples I made up to someone who understands that something is correct. That you can only be angry at your superiors. You can only be angry at a superior idea. Remember, if you like it better for the time being, you can only be angry at that to which you are inferior. Same thing, but it sounds better to some of you that like to wallow in it. You hear, you feel, you understand simply that that's correct. Then the question about, is that true? There's no sense in me beating on that which is invisible and doesn't exist, is there? But it's meaningless. To the few people, to someone who understands outside 3D limits, outside binary limits, to a real revolutionist. The idea is, the question about, is that true? There is no answer. The questions ain't worthy of listening to. The question is not the kind of thing that a revolutionist consciousness would even entertain. Literally. I'm telling you, it's not something you wrestle with and think, well, theoretically, I'm going to in some way rise to the level of a Germanic Superman, and I won't care whether things are true or not and all that. We're not even in the same universe. It is not an argument. It is not an internal tug-of-war. It's not trying to play with words in a philosophical way as to whether something is true or not. Is it true that there are gods or a God? It's not a debate. It's an understanding that the concept of true is meaningless in the 3D world. It is a passing fancy. And to a 4D mind, it's not even very fancy. And it's sure as hell not passing enough. It's only if something is correct. And if it's correct, then you've got to act upon it. Then you can use it. So it's not a question of, is it true that energy, negative energy, only flows from an inferior position to a superior one? The idea, the question about, is that true? It doesn't exist. It's meaningless. It's just childish babble. The question is that correct? And when it's correct, you should act on it. When it's correct, you got no choice. When it's correct, as I was trying to drag it a little closer to my description of trying to give you a way to get your foot in this, of an operational directive that you feel that, yes, this is correct. That may go into an extended verbal description again. It could be that you find yourself, not could be, it is, that you taste the correctness of something, but you find that you are continually, fill in your own blanks, distracted. You forget about it. Through force of habit, through force of being human, you find yourself back being angry again. But perhaps closer and closer to being able to shave it down to split seconds, you catch yourself, and maybe you even catch yourself before a certain angers get to the screen of consciousness, before you actually say it, before you accept it as something that you said, some anger towards somebody, some idea. You understand the correctness of not doing it, and yet everything seems to be weighted in you to go ahead and do it. There even seems to be internal voices in you. Some part of the partnership even says, well, listen, if this was actually true and you really understood it, you wouldn't have to still be wrestling with it. If it was actually true, you would have more success with this. So perhaps it's not that important whether you curse and get mad at this particular time or not. We'll work on it tomorrow. You'll know it better by and by. To use the idea I was trying to give you in the words operational directive is, you have an unconditional taste of the correctness of something, such as negative energy can only flow from an inferior position to a superior one. And you cannot seem to stop it at all times. You always seem to be, or back on the verge of being continually angry, just like you used to be. And yet there is this continuing semi-awareness of the correctness that every time I do this, all I'm doing is attacking from an inferior position. Everything that I do not approve of, everything that I find to be worthy of my criticism is actually a superior position. Everybody, to get it really down to the howdy-doody level, everybody in this world, whether I know them personally or just see them, just their looks, anybody I don't like is my superior. It's not a spiritual fact. It's not a philosophical or theoretical fact. It's a fact, Jack. It's a fact. That would be his name. Or her name, Mr. A Fact, or Mrs. A Fact. The concept of true. I said it amounted to a pastime. It operates not just looked at from an individual level of an ordinary man, of me calling it a pastime that life allows. Looked at it on a more general level, you could see that the idea of true would be likened to a yellow circuit disposable diaper. It would be like the final, at least in the 3D level, it would be like a neurological grunt wrapper. That's what truth is. That's what true is. As an aside, does anybody even get a slight notion or an aroma right now of why men have not philosophically ever been able, in the religious field among others, but specifically there, ever been able to put together the idea of God and goodness and then what's going on in life? Nobody can explain it. Well, of course I can explain it, but nobody can hear it. So back to the real world. Nobody can explain it. And I just told you why. How can the gods do this? All right, there comes a criticism from one level to another. You've forgotten the levels already? How can the gods do this? Or how can my God, how can the God do this? Now, no matter how magnanimous your God may be, let's face facts, that kind of attitude has at least a hint of criticism therein. So the flow of energy is going from what? An inferior to a superior. Of course, in the great 4D world, that which seems to be antipodal can simultaneously be not antipodal. That is, the very gods that you have invented. What does that say about them? There is hardly any way out. Except, of course, for the 4D trapdoor. Let me try and limn a good one. Just as factually correct. Not true, way beyond that, correct. How about rule number 2 in the world of ODs? I guess my description's about to be a little more cumbersome, less pithy than the first rule. But let me describe it. The description is more important than we make it into an instant epigram anyway. It is this. You can correctly assume, read OD, used as an operational directive. You can assume. Everybody doesn't understand by assume. I'm talking about correctly perceive. You correctly assume that anyone who can bring out anger in you, anyone, is a fraud. They are a test put there to check out your understanding, and that person is secretly laughing at you. That is the kind of correct information, kind of correct, absolutely irrational, insane, beyond any matter of true information on which one should operate. Now I'm telling you something that is of value. If you don't find it of value, then something's wrong with you and your participation in this. That I mean absolutely, person to person or on television, that they show a congressman, they show a prime minister from some other country, they show a so-called artist. You're looking at it with little electronical molecules on this tube. There seems to be a person in there, and the person making some comment about what my art means. Or somebody saying, well, my nation's attitude toward you people is, if you go too far, or it's a congressman saying, well, my concern about my fellow man. And in you, inside of your own molecular patterns, chemically and electrically, rise up in you any form of angers, criticism, of you dumb bastard, or you simple shit, who do you think you're fooling? Any form whatsoever, you can correctly assume. Now, I'm not going to even hint to you from where, but I'm telling you, you may correctly assume it's a test that certain forces are putting on you in particular, although it could be millions of other people watching the same thing. They're not having exactly the same reaction you are to this guy and what he just said. You may correctly assume that these forces have presented this right then as a test to test your level of understanding. And I'm telling you, that person, that senator, that foreign prime minister, that artist, doesn't mean a damn word of it. It's a fraud. They put him up to it, and he or she is laughing at you. They may be looking seriously, talking about, well, if you put me back in office, all the things I'll do to you. And everything in your partnership is saying, you must think I was really a yokel cubed. You dumb bastard, about how much superior you are, how much smarter you are, how much you can see through. How can you still believe that we will accept that kind of baloney? It is a fraud, I'm telling you. It is a trick. They put him or her up to it, and it's just a big old sham. It's just to test you and that person, not to mention the forces, but just that person. It's an act. They're going blah, 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 and they know what you're doing, or they do once you do it, and they're simply laughing at you. And you think that you're laughing at them or being sarcastic. You don't know who the joke's on. If there was any proper use of that kind of hostile sarcasm, then I assure you that that person is looking at you through that TV set, through a movie, through a book you may be reading, through the newspaper, and they're thinking to themselves, and they're just playing out the part they were put there to test you. Is their feeling is, good God, why did they waste their time testing this person? They're laughing at you. You're the dumbest son of a bitch they've ever seen. Your attitude toward them about being a rascal, being doltish, that's nothing. I assure you they're laughing at you and your little pettifogging angers. You are a laughing stock. I assure you that is the correct way to assume what is taking place. This is not spiritual theory time. It is not psychological games. I am telling you a fact. In person, it's the same thing, but I was trying to take an extreme for you to where there seems to be some distance. And it can happen. Surely some of you got some kind of glimpse. But it bypasses. It absolutely surrounds. Bypass or transcends doesn't really describe it. But it surrounds ordinary concepts of time. That is, you can be reading something that somebody said, or they're quoted something that was said in 1923. And you can sit there in the privacy of your little kitchen and read it. And there's that good old thing of, oh, you dumb bastard. You stupid shithead. Whatever the feeling is, I assure you, time has not passed. And that person is not dead and gone. The test is still being replayed. And you're right in the midst of it. And this person, assuming that there is an actual attributing of the quote you read to some real person and they lived and all that. And you may think they're dead. They're not. It's a test. And the people who are putting this test on you and the person who said it is still around. And they're laughing at you. You are a laughing stock. You have not only failed the test, that one test, but those people, and you believe are dead and gone, that you believe are your inferiors, that you believe are your cultural, intellectual inferiors. It's a joke. It's a test. It is, in a form, it is the first definition of ironic. Nobody seems to use it anymore, of feigned ignorance. It is truly ironic, not in the way in which the word is misused now, but of people apparently striking, pompous, dumbass poses, saying things that you are too smart to fall for. Any form of criticism, any angers that you feel toward them is a test. And they may be staying up there looking like a crude caricature of Huey Long. They may look like the dumbest rube in the world. I assure you, it is an act. It is a sham. You're looking right through that book, through that printed page, through that television set, in person. As the anger is flowing from you, it seems to be caused by them. No matter how they look, how ridiculous, how insane, I assure you that internally, thanks to the forces behind them that sent this as a test, just the person there, they may be pretty far down the hierarchy of the forces that sent them. They may be a lackey, but they know a test. They know what they were sent there for. Somebody else told them to do it. But there they are doing this, striking these kind of pompous, dumbass poses, and you're over here laughing at them, and they're aware of it, and they see where you measure up on the test, even if they were just sent there and doing just their job. As I said, very far down the hierarchy. They're laughing at you. Anytime you're mad at somebody, you're mad at your superiors. They may simply be a superior by the force of the other activities that sent them there to test you, but they're laughing right at you, looking just as serious, looking just as dumb, just as pompous, playing out whatever the role is as you take it to be. They're doing it. They're seeing you fail the test. They're seeing and feeling your anger. And they're just laughing at you. That, for all of you, should be taken as a serious occupational directive. As I am not attempting, as you know or should know by now, to play some kind of verbal or psychological games. And it's not that this is true. It's correct. Anytime you are mad, anytime you're laughing, which is a form of anger at the ordinary level, anytime you're being sarcastic, anytime you feel any degree of criticism toward anybody, you're inferior to them. You know, with people involved with this, and it's true on another level with everybody, but with you people, it is a test. Because any source, I'm talking about a person now, but any person that seems to be able to cause you, even if it's just in passing, even if it's from a distance, that seems to be the source of causing you to feel angry, it's a sham. It is not what it appears to be. It is a test, and you're failing it. And the very people that you believe you're looking down on are laughing at you like an idiot. Now, of course, you can believe that you're laughing at them. Ha! That's the kind of nonsense that I might have believed. I might have believed when I was 16. I guess that's the kind of bullshit that people in parts of New Jersey and Alabama and around Bakersfield might fall for. Ha! And it's an act. It is a sham. What they're saying, the way they're behaving, the apparent emotions they're putting out, it is an act. Even when they're apparent, they're looking off, they're looking dead at you, and they're laughing. You're the joke. You are the joke. It is a physical fact. It is a revolutionary fact, but it is a fact. You cannot look down your nose at your superiors. You can't even see them. You cannot shake your fist at your superiors. You cannot ridicule your superiors. You cannot criticize them. You can't even find them. And when you apparently have found your inferiors, that is, someone that you can laugh at, someone that you can safely criticize, what I'm telling you, it's an act. It is a sham, and it is a test. And everyone involved, of course, the actual forces behind it, I can't tell you that they even have as a hobby three-dimensional laughter. But those that they send as the test, that is, the people that apparently make you mad, they know enough to know what's going on, and they're laughing at you. Anytime you're laughing at somebody, you have stumbled upon, not your superior necessarily, but you have stumbled upon your superiors putting on a test. And they have sent out actors, and the actors know they're actors. They know that they don't mean it. They know that you're failing the test, and they know that you're looking at them and laughing. And they're the ones actually laughing. They're laughing at you. You're mad. You're angry. And you believe that you're in a superior position, when physically, angers cannot run from a superior position downhill. They can only go the other way around. And the tape can only go, I guess, in another direction. Some small updates, some other matters from the last few weeks. Once somebody has any sort of understanding of what I was describing as the pleasurable molecular arrangement within oneself, then I've got to ask you, if you were reasonable in any manner, why would you then tolerate? Why would you then abide? Why would you then apparently personally pursue arranging the molecular patterns in you in ways that continually produce displeasure? What sort of hound dog would you be? What sort of poor person? And I'm not talking about, abandoning displeasurable molecular rearrangings. I'm not talking about abandoning something that'd really be hard, like giving up chocolates or smoking. I'm talking about something easy, like giving up anger. Simply giving up angry arrangements when you can ask yourself a fairly simple question, which is always in line for fairly simple people, is why I know about it. Is what I'm doing pleasurable right now? Sitting here being angry at my mate. Sitting here being angry at the guy sitting in the car over here. Being angry, I don't know, just kind of angry in general at being alive. Do I personally I'll ask myself a real simple question, and I'll expect a real simple answer, okay? All right. Do I find this pleasurable? No. May I ask you this deep philosophical question? Why the fuck do you do it? It is a matter of molecular arrangement. And it's always with a conscious person, whatever seems to be the feeling, always is tied to the molecular arrangements, the molecular rearrangements up at the higher end of my own nervous system. That is what I apparently am thinking about. If I do not find this pleasurable, why do I do it? Why do I abide me letting these arrangements reoccur? Why do I apparently participate? Why do I apparently do those things, fall right into whether I seem to be the initiator or not? But something happens here and I apparently react to it, and it rearranges my molecules in a way that is non-pleasurable. That's right, and you are an intelligent, conscious, grown-up man or woman, right? Right. I don't guess I'll stay there very long. It begins to sound like a sermon. It's got nothing to do with guilt, of course. Because guilt's no more pertinent in a three-dimensional manner than the idea of truth is. And yet everybody believes that there are things that I need to escape from. You know, like what? And I will go ahead and assume for these next few seconds I was going to do this, that you people now believe that you're intelligent enough, sophisticated enough, that the things you want to escape from, you more or less would more or less agree that, well, they're kind of tied to my attitudes anyway. That I can't really lay the entire blame on my mother and father, or my job, or the economy, or the capitalistic system. A lot of it, I guess, is me. All right, let's assume that you know that, and let's assume there is some truth in that. Then the next question is, why do you do it? And you cannot say, well, I cannot not do it. We're not talking about the world of spirits and demons anymore making you do things, and devils making you do things, or psychological traumas. We're talking about when you're displeased, when you feel as though something is not pleasant to me. I don't like me thinking about this. Still assume that you've gone past the point that it's not just, I don't like people doing this, that sometimes at least you should be the point that you can correctly suspect that I should be thinking of it, that I don't like me thinking in this way about that. Not about that itself, I don't like the way I think about it and what it does to me. That, what you're speaking of, is not some secret cosmic world of the spirit and etc. We're talking about the molecular arrangement in your nervous system up here in the area referred to laughingly and casually as your brain. The molecular arrangement gets changed and you think a different way, and then you feel a different way, and you can change it. Why would you continue to participate, to abide, to tolerate those molecular arrangements that continually, consistently, and in a pattern spring up in your nervous system, in your brain, that are not pleasurable? Why? I don't know. Well, all right. Another piece from my drawings of the trenches and the middle ground, the no man's land between the extreme, the fightings of World War I, the Great War, the war. My kind of war. The war with funny hats. The war with leghorns. There's not many wars you see that had chickens, you know. All right, part, I guess 3.7. The middle ground and the sense of importance, colon. In the state, in your state and in the state, the populace, that is ordinary people, both out there and you know where. The populace are forced to perceive things, that covers everything, things as either being important or not. So when you are dealing in the ordinary world, out in the no man's land between the trenches, you are dealing now with the population. You're dealing with all ordinary people staggering about in an uncertain manner in the ambiguous area of no man's land, feeling, driven to believe and driven to feel that everything is either very important or not important at all, and yet they are continually held, forced to stagger about out there where there is never a certainty as to whether something is important or not. Under those conditions, out in no man's land, in the middle ground, no one, that is, no ordinary person, can ever be fully certain that any particular action, thing, idea, person is important or not. Some of you should begin to have some passing appreciation of the beauty of these situations that life arranges. Although all we're describing, all that you can see in words, is a 3D fragment of a 4- and 5-dimensional loop, but even what you can see is the beautiful arrangement, the ordinary consciousness, the wiring system of everybody is such that everything is either important or not. Of course, it can change from when? Time to time. Ordinary consciousness does not notice it, but in a particular time you ask somebody, hey, is this important? The person goes, no. Well, how about this? Yes. Is these kind of people important? No. How about these kind of? Yes. Is a particular person in this position important? No. But how about over here? No. But how about these? Yes. All right. It is wired in everybody to believe that everything is either important or not. But then everybody is forced to stagger about out there between the trenches, out there in the great middle ground, the land of the bourgeoisie, the land of the middle class, the populace, the masses, where everybody more or less falls. And they're forced to stay out there and stagger about in this uncertain, ambiguous area while driven unconditionally to believe that everything is either important or not, but then they are left confined to an area where they can never be certain. Although it is a fragment of something else, it is beautiful. Well, if you're there, of course, I don't guess it's real beautiful. But you feel like somebody nailed your shorts to the floor. But it is beautiful. You would then have the real revolutionist, on the other hand. And he would be able to see this battleground. He'd be able to see the entire battleground and the middle ground, the no man's land, from a higher viewpoint. And yet, if we were looking at it, that is, what he can see back from a 3D level, then it would seem that what he saw would be extreme, because his view of it would be this. He would see that it is all totally important and not so. That is, he would see everything as being of equal necessity. This is, if it were attempted to be presented by this fictional real revolutionist in some way, if it was presented in a attempted forceful manner as an idea, a theory, a philosophy, a religion, and they put it in the best words he could, it would be seen by the populace of the state as being extreme, underline, all caps, the word extreme. Because apparently it would be a certainty. And there is no certainty in the middle ground. There is no certainty in no man's land. So even this 3D fragment that I put into words, the description, that the real revolutionist would be able to see that it is all of importance and is not, which, i.e., that it is all of equal necessity. That would be seen as an extreme view. It would be seen as being an untrue view. It would, however, be the one certain and correct view. But this is far removed, although some of you may believe that you verbally followed some string of logic in here, it is far removed from where I started of saying, or mentioning the question of whether anything, any particular thing, and then of course everything, but whether any particular thing is of itself important or not important. There can be no truth there. The correctness is, it is all of equal necessity. So the idea of something being important, the idea of an idea, a particular idea of being important or being useless, of an occurrence, of a historical occurrence, of a contemporary situation, of a particular historical or contemporary figure, of oneself. Never mind that. The question of whether any idea, occurrence, thing, person, is it important or not, is not a valid question. So forget a valid answer. It is not even a question. It's all of equal necessity. There would be nothing of importance from the revolutionist viewpoint, and there would be nothing of no importance. If it was a something, it's of some importance, or it wouldn't be. But to say, is this important or not important, is not a question. Such a question can only have a true or false answer. And a true or false answer is not ever correct. You're in a different league. You're in a small-time universe. You're in a yokel universe. You're playing 5-inning ball. You got 7 players on the field. You got a bat with a hole in it. You got a ball with a hole around it. You got outfield fences that are behind home plate. No matter what the foot soldiers, the camp followers, the dilettantes may think, the real revolutionist understands that the rebellion is something to do, it's not something to believe in. The revolutionist, under some conditions I could perceive, and they even describe it some other time, or that you might imagine, could and apparently be involved in 3-dimensional propaganda. I guess we should be charitable and refer to it as something like proper/info. But the real revolutionists would understand that this revolution has got to be something that one does, and in no manner is it something that anybody believes in, especially the revolutionist himself. There is nothing to believe in. There's only something to do. You might be able to talk about the doing. Some of the revolutionists might talk about the doing amongst themselves, and there could be a kind of privileged propaganda, info, that might go around. But the privileged info The only reason it would be privileged, the only reason it would be useful is it regards doing something, not fucking believing in something. A real revolutionist has nothing to believe in, unless, for the time being, just for the night, unless you want to refer to change, unless you want to refer to the revolution itself. I shouldn't give you that way out. It's still nothing to believe in. You do it, or you don't do it. Believing in it is not doing it. There's no way to believe in something and to use that as a substitute for doing it. You can have 100 radical dilettantes. You can have 1,000 count followers. You can have 10,000 dunderheaded foot soldiers. All the camouflage clothes that they got at Kmart, and they can all hang around the woods, and they can all open cans with pocket knives. They can talk about a revolution. They can sing songs around a campfire and all say that they believe in it. They might as well have stayed in the Boy Scouts. Nothing's going on. It may make them excited for the weekend, and they may go home with their pants wet. They may believe they did something more exciting than going to a Unitarian service or visiting their in-laws on Sunday. But the revolution is not something to believe in. It's worse than that, but I was going to save it for some future date. It's not something to believe in. It's much worse than that. That is, when we saying it's nothing to believe in. It's a lot worse than that. If it wasn't a lot worse than that, would I not, assuming that I'm not trying to do you any harm, would not I have given you something to believe in by now? It's much worse than that. Only the dilettantes, only the weekend warriors, only the Kmart rebels believe that the revolution is something to believe in. That's why out in the ordinary world, in the 3D literal world, revolutions never work. The ruling power simply change clothes. The palace gets stormed, and the current tyrant, if he doesn't get shot right off, if he doesn't get hit by a ricochet, once the opposition comes in and he realizes the game is up, he takes off his clothes and he gives it to the new group. They let him leave town. They send him off to Mallorca or to Spain. Let him go hang around Perón's tomb. They tell him to write if he gets work. Nothing changes. They change clothes. They change underwear and socks with one another. That is not a revolution. There is no real revolution out in the 3D world. There is a constant change. There is a constant mechanical, slow, methodical, mostly methodical, expansion of life. But the real revolution is something you do. It's not something you believe in. If you believe in it, as I said, I'm going to leave some of this for some other time, but if you believe in the revolution, let me suggest to you, hint, 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 a word to the wise, a wink is as good as a... If you believe in the revolution, just remember that I told you, it's something to do, it's not something you believe in. Since believe in always and inescapably brings in that great waste of time that we all know as talk. I might also point this out, that the real revolutionist knows that dialogue the dialogue must ultimately, or may ultimately, I'll leave it with you for tonight, come down to this. I shoot, you listen. Do I have to remind anybody right quick that none of this may have any particular validity, much less you think that I'm actually referring to anything at all that might go on out here. But a real revolutionist, that does sound, or I thought it would. Not many of you came forth with a proper, my expected reaction. But the ultimate dialogue may, either may or must, but it may be to the real revolutionist this, quote, I shoot, you listen. Take it from the bushes, take it from the state out here to your state. I shoot, you listen. There is quite a correct distance between that and, boy, I wish I could quit eating sugar. Let's see. Maybe I'll go to a stop eating sugar clinic. If I had the money, if I can get another job, if I can sell my grandfather's cat. Maybe then I can go to that clinic. Maybe I'll start out and I'll cut down. Maybe I'll read some more articles free at the library about the dangers of smoking 4 packs of sugar a day. And maybe that will frighten me more and bring me more to my senses of giving up sugar, right? The real revolutionist understands that the dialogue may ultimately come down to 4 words. I shoot, you listen. Yeah, but... I'm about to say that I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop.